Welcome back to The Deep Dive, where we explore the innovations, regulations, and challenges shaping the life sciences industry. Today, we're covering a topic that sits at the crossroads of healthcare, technology, and patient safety: cybersecurity in connected medical devices.
When we talk about medical device innovation, the conversation often centers around functionality, how a device can improve outcomes, increase convenience, or provide real time data. But with every new feature and every new connection to a network comes a new set of risks. Cybersecurity is no longer just an IT issue, it's a patient safety issue.
Exactly. Think about it: pacemakers, insulin pumps, implantable defibrillators, infusion pumps, even remote patient monitoring systems. More and more of these devices are connected to hospital networks, the cloud, and in some cases, even to consumer smartphones. That connectivity is incredibly powerful, but it also creates entry points for cyber attacks.
And this isn't theoretical. We've already seen examples where vulnerabilities in connected medical devices were exposed. Back in 2017, the FDA had to recall nearly 500,000 pacemakers because they were found to be hackable. An attacker could reprogram them remotely. More recently, infusion pumps have been flagged as high risk targets because of flaws that could allow unauthorized access and dose manipulation.
That's the scary part. When cybersecurity lapses happen in healthcare, the consequences aren't just about data breaches or financial fraud, they could be life threatening. A cyber attack that alters device functionality could put patient lives directly at risk.
But here's the tension. The demand for connected devices is only growing. Like remote monitoring and telehealth exploded during the pandemic. Hospitals want smarter devices that integrate seamlessly with electronic health records. Patients want wearables and implants that give them more control over their care. Manufacturers are under pressure to innovate quickly, which sometimes means cybersecurity isn't built into the design from the ground up.
And regulators have noticed. The FDA has made cybersecurity in medical devices a top priority. In fact, starting in 2023, new legislation requires device manufacturers to submit cybersecurity plans as part of their pre-market submissions. That means companies must demonstrate not only that their devices are safe and effective, but also that they're secure.
That's a big shift. For years, cybersecurity was more of a post market concern. If vulnerabilities were discovered, manufacturers were expected to patch them or notify the FDA. Now, the expectation is proactive. Design devices with security in mind, build processes for continuous monitoring, and plan for software updates throughout the product lifecycle.
And that's not easy, especially for smaller manufacturers. Unlike big medtech companies with dedicated security teams, startups may not have in-house cybersecurity expertise, yet they're still subject to the same regulatory requirements. That's where we see a growing need for guidance and structured frameworks.
Let's break down some of the key challenges. One big one is legacy systems. Hospitals are filled with older devices that were never designed with cybersecurity in mind. They might still be clinically effective, but they lack encryption, modern authentication, or the ability to be patched easily. Integrating those legacy systems with newer devices creates a patchwork of vulnerabilities.
Then there's supply chain risk. Many devices rely on third-party components, whether it's chips, software libraries, or cloud services. If any of those components have a vulnerability, the device itself could be compromised. And because medical devices often have long lifespans, manufacturers need to plan for how they'll monitor and patch not just their own code, but also dependencies from suppliers.
Absolutely. And another dimension to that is usability. Security features can't come at the expense of clinical functionality. For example, if authentication requirements are too cumbersome, healthcare providers may bypass them in an emergency. That's why designing for both security and usability is so important and so challenging.
This is where the balancing innovation and risk part really comes in. You can't freeze device innovation out of fear of cyber attacks, but you also can't roll out devices with weak safeguards. Striking that balance requires collaboration between engineers, cybersecurity experts, clinicians, and regulators.
And let's not forget patients themselves. Increasingly, patients are active users of connected devices. Think of diabetes management systems or wearable cardiac monitors. Patients are downloading apps, connecting devices to Wi Fi, even sharing data with their providers. That introduces a human factor. Education is just as critical as engineering.
Exactly. If a patient uses a weak password or connects their device to an unsecured network, the system is still vulnerable, no matter how strong the manufacturer's design is. That's why part of cybersecurity strategy has to be patient education, clear instructions, warnings, and support resources so people understand how to use their devices safely.
And regulators are emphasizing that too. The FDA's latest guidance on medical device cybersecurity highlights the importance of not just technical controls, but also communication. How manufacturers inform users, healthcare providers, and even other stakeholders about risks, updates, and patches.
So, what does good practice look like? For one, designing devices with a secure by design mindset, embedding encryption, access controls, and intrusion detection from the very beginning. Another is building a robust post market surveillance system, actively monitoring for vulnerabilities, issuing timely updates, and being transparent with regulators and users when issues arise.
Right? And we're also seeing the industry move toward more collaborative models. Groups like the Health Information Sharing and Analysis Center, HISAC, and MedISAO are creating platforms for manufacturers, providers, and government agencies to share information about emerging threats. That kind of collaboration helps the whole ecosystem become more resilient.
And as connected medical devices become more complex, think AI enabled diagnostics or implantables with wireless software updates, the stakes will only get higher. Cybersecurity will remain one of the most critical pieces of patient safety and regulatory compliance in the years ahead.
One area we haven't talked about yet is the hospital environment itself. Even if a device is designed with strong security, once it's deployed in a healthcare system, it becomes part of a much larger ecosystem. Hospitals often run on complex networks with hundreds of devices connected simultaneously: ventilators, monitors, infusion pumps, imaging machines, all feeding data into the same systems. That creates an enormous attack surface.
And it's not just about the devices. Hospitals themselves are frequent cyber attack targets. Ransomware attacks on health systems have skyrocketed in recent years, with hackers locking down networks and demanding payment to restore access. If those same networks are controlling connected devices, the risks compound quickly. A cyber attack could not only freeze data access, but also disrupt active patient treatments.
Exactly. And that's why the concept of defense in depth is so important. It's not enough to have one layer of protection. Manufacturers, hospitals, and even patients need multiple safeguards: secure device design, segmented hospital networks, continuous monitoring, and contingency plans in case something goes wrong.
Another major challenge is patch management. Unlike a smartphone or a laptop, a medical device can't just push out an update overnight. Updates need to be validated, tested, and sometimes even approved by regulators, because any change could potentially affect device performance or safety. That means vulnerabilities may linger for longer than in other industries, simply because of the complexity of patching.
Right? And that creates a tough balance. Regulators don't want devices that are insecure, but they also can't compromise patient safety with untested updates. Some companies are addressing this with modular software architectures so they can update security layers without affecting the core clinical functions of the device. But we're still in the early stages of figuring out how to make that work seamlessly.
We should also talk about global differences in regulation, because this isn't just a US issue. In Europe, for example, the medical device regulation and in vitro diagnostic regulation both include cybersecurity requirements, and the EU's Cyber Resilience Act is poised to set even higher expectations. Canada, Australia, and Japan are also tightening cybersecurity standards for connected devices. That means companies planning for international markets need to think globally, not just about FDA requirements.
And Interoperability plays into that too. Devices are increasingly expected to connect not just within a single hospital system, but across borders and healthcare networks. Without consistent standards, the risk of weak links grows. That's why groups like the International Medical Device Regulators Forum are working toward harmonized guidance.
Another interesting angle is AI in cybersecurity for medical devices. Just as AI is being used to enhance diagnostics and clinical workflows, it's also being deployed to detect cyber threats in real time. Machine learning algorithms can spot unusual patterns in device behavior, like data being transmitted to an unexpected location, that could signal a cyber intrusion. But of course, that raises its own regulatory and validation questions.
And then there's the human factor again. Even the most secure device can be compromised by social engineering. A hacker might phish a hospital employee, trick them into giving access credentials, and suddenly every connected device on that network is at risk. That's why training and awareness are just as important as technical safeguards.
Exactly. Cybersecurity in this space has to be a shared responsibility. Manufacturers can design secure devices, regulators can set strong expectations, and hospitals can implement robust IT systems. But without collaboration, gaps will always remain. That's why public-private partnerships are becoming so critical. We're seeing agencies like the FDA working closely with device makers, cybersecurity firms, and healthcare providers to share threat intelligence and best practices.
And speaking of best practices, let's highlight a few that are gaining traction. First, threat modeling during development. Actively thinking about how a device could be attacked and designing defenses from the start. Second, penetration testing. Bringing in independent experts to try to break into the device before it's released. And third, life cycle management, committing to long-term monitoring and patching, even years after the device has been launched.
All of this leads back to the big picture. Trust. Patients trust that when they wear a device, implant a device, or rely on one in the hospital, it will not only work, but also be safe from outside interference. Clinicians trust that devices provide accurate data and function reliably. And regulators trust that manufacturers are doing everything possible to anticipate and mitigate risks. Cybersecurity underpins all of that trust.
And as the industry continues to innovate, bringing in more connected, cloud-based, and AI-powered devices, the spotlight on cybersecurity will only grow brighter. It's not just about protecting data, it's about protecting lives.
Another area that deserves attention is third-party vendors and the medical device supply chain. Even if a manufacturer designs a secure device, many components, like software libraries, chips, and connectivity modules, are sourced from external suppliers. If one of those suppliers has a vulnerability, it can cascade into the final product. This has been a recurring theme in broader cybersecurity, and now we're seeing the same risks play out in healthcare.
Exactly. That's why vendor vetting and ongoing monitoring are so critical. Manufacturers need to conduct due diligence not just at the time of supplier selection, but continuously. This means auditing vendor practices, requiring cybersecurity certifications, and in some cases, even mandating penetration tests at the component level. A device is only as strong as its weakest link, and often that weakest link sits outside the manufacturer's direct control.
And then we have legacy devices, which may be the biggest headache of all. Hospitals are filled with connected devices that were never designed with modern cybersecurity in mind. Some of them run on outdated operating systems, like Windows 7 or even older, which no longer receive security patches. Yet they're still in use because replacing them is expensive, or because the clinical need is too great to retire them. These legacy devices can serve as entry points for attackers.
Right. And unlike consumer electronics, you can't just swap them out every few years. A diagnostic machine or surgical robot might cost millions of dollars, and hospitals plan to use them for a decade or more. That means manufacturers have to plan for long-term support, patches, updates, and mitigations that extend far beyond the typical product lifecycle. Regulators are beginning to recognize this, which is why there's more emphasis now on post market cybersecurity management in addition to pre market submissions.
Speaking of regulators, one development worth highlighting is the FDA's RTA policy for cybersecurity documentation. As of last year, the FDA has made it clear if a medical device submission doesn't include a sufficient cybersecurity plan covering threat models, patching strategy, and lifecycle management, they can refuse to even review it. That's a huge signal to the industry that cybersecurity isn't optional anymore. It's a baseline expectation for market entry.
And it's interesting to think about how this connects with patient engagement. As more devices become wearable or home based, like insulin pumps, cardiac monitors, or neurostimulation systems, patients themselves are part of the security ecosystem. How do you make sure patients install updates? How do you prevent unsafe device modifications? And how do you educate patients about cybersecurity risks without overwhelming them? These are human factors that haven't always been front and center, but they matter a ton in connected care.
That's a great point, and it brings us to usability and security design trade-offs. For example, you want a device to be secure with strong authentication, but if it's too cumbersome for clinicians or patients, they might find workarounds, like using the same password everywhere or disabling security features. Balancing security with usability is one of the toughest challenges in medical device design, and it requires careful human factors engineering.
And looking ahead, I think we're going to see more emphasis on zero trust architecture in healthcare. Instead of assuming that devices on a hospital network can be trusted, zero trust assumes the opposite. Every device, user, and connection must be continuously verified. It's a model that's been gaining traction in enterprise IT, and now it's making its way into medical device environments.
At the same time, collaboration across industries will be essential. Medical device manufacturers can learn from lessons in aerospace, automotive, and financial services, which have been grappling with cybersecurity challenges at scale for years. Cross-sector knowledge sharing could help accelerate maturity in healthcare, which historically lags behind in cybersecurity investment.
And let's not forget the insurance angle. Cyber insurance is becoming a hot topic for healthcare providers, and we're starting to see discussions about whether medical device manufacturers will also need specialized cyber liability coverage. If a vulnerability leads to patient harm, who bears responsibility? The hospital, the manufacturer, the software vendor. These liability questions will shape not just contracts, but the economics of the industry moving forward.
As we move toward wrapping up today's conversation, it's worth zooming out for a moment. Cybersecurity in connected medical devices isn't just about protecting data. It's about protecting patients. Every safeguard, every patch, every design choice directly impacts safety and trust. That's what makes this such a unique challenge compared to other industries. In healthcare, cybersecurity is patient safety.
And that's why the stakes are so high. A compromised device isn't just an IT issue, it can mean delayed care, disrupted treatment, or even direct harm. The industry has to stop thinking of cybersecurity as an afterthought or a compliance checkbox and instead see it as an integral part of device design and lifecycle management.
Looking forward, we'll likely see more convergence between regulatory science and cybersecurity science. Already, the FDA is signaling that secure development practices, vulnerability management, and patching strategies are going to be key review elements. Internationally, we're seeing the EU, Health Canada, and other regulators move in the same direction. That means companies need to align not only with today's expectations, but also anticipate where the bar is rising in the years ahead.
Another trend we expect to see is greater collaboration across the ecosystem. No single manufacturer or provider can tackle this alone. Hospitals, device companies, regulators, payers, and even patients will all have roles to play. Public-private partnerships, information sharing groups, and cross-sector alliances will help accelerate learning and prevent the same mistakes from being repeated across the industry.
And while it might sound daunting, there's also enormous opportunity here. Companies that get cybersecurity right don't just avoid risks, they gain a competitive edge. Hospitals and payers are increasingly asking about device security before purchase. Patients are more aware than ever of data privacy and safety. A strong cybersecurity posture can become part of a company's brand and value proposition.
That's where Emma International comes in. We support clients at every stage of this journey, from pre market submissions with robust cybersecurity documentation to post market monitoring to building cross functional governance frameworks that keep teams aligned. Our approach is about making cybersecurity not just a compliance requirement, but a driver of trust and innovation.
And we do this with a deep appreciation for the complexity of regulated industries. It's not enough to say, encrypt your data or patch your systems. You need solutions that fit within FDA expectations, ISO standards, and real-world operational constraints in clinical settings. That's why our consulting model is hands-on, contextual, and always grounded in both regulatory science and technical reality.
So, if your organization is developing connected medical devices, or if you're already in the market and want to strengthen your security posture, we would love to start that conversation with you. You can reach our team directly at info@emmainternational.com or learn more about our cybersecurity and compliance services at emmainternational.com.
Because at the end of the day, cybersecurity isn't just about keeping devices online. It's about protecting patients, safeguarding trust, and enabling innovation that can transform care. The companies that take this seriously today will be the ones leading the market tomorrow.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of The Deep Dive. We'll continue exploring the most critical topics shaping the life sciences industry, bringing insight, context, and strategies you can use to stay ahead.
And as always, stay safe, stay compliant, and stay innovative.